So I appreciate everybody, before we get started, I appreciate everybody being flexible, letting me move my schedule from earlier in October in regards to having my son had surgery and stuff. And so he's doing good, and appreciate people's flexibility on that. So I appreciate everybody, before we get started, appreciate everybody being flexible, letting me move my schedule from earlier in October in regards to having my son had surgery and stuff. And so he's doing good, and appreciate people's flexibility on that. So I appreciate everybody, before we get started. So what's the echo from Allison? All right.
We just love to hear your voice so much. Well, it's going to be in the background for the whole meeting. I don't know if Heidi has joined us yet, but it looked to me like the rest of the board is here. So I'm going to call this meeting to order. It's a little past 11:30, and I'd entertain a motion to work off the agenda as provided.
This is Patty, so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of working off the agenda as provided signify by saying yes.
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 Any opposed signify by saying no. Motion carries. Gets us to our consent agenda, which hopefully everybody had an opportunity to read the packet. So I'd entertain a motion on the consent agenda as well.
So move, Steve.
Steve's moved. Is there a second to approve the consent agenda as provided?
This is Patty, I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
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 Any opposed signify by saying no. Motion carries. Brings us to old business. I want to thank the two of you, and I'm not going to call out anybody, but two of you have sent me back your feedback on your self-evaluation report. Please take the time to do that over the next week or so and send it back to me, so maybe we can really digest that before our next meeting. If you need another copy of it, just let me know and we'll send you out another copy to complete, and you can send that back to either Allison or myself, and we'll get them compiled and see where we need to go for board training going forward.
And Jim, I did send a lot of people filled it out online, and I did email it. I got it to your K-12, it said it went through, but your Hallett Financial doesn't like me sending it emails.
How come?
I don't know, it just says undeliverable, but we had everyone complete except the new Region 9. And then I don't know if Steve Hall, if you did it, but I'm not sure if as a lead admin if you felt like that was a requirement or not of you. So we have 8 or 7 that are on here. So I'll make sure and try and get that to you again. So if you guys believe you submitted it, we do have that. And I will get it to Jim again.
Thanks, appreciate that.
Yeah, and we can put it on the next agenda. And again, as we talk about accreditation moving forward, it's good to have that discussion closer to the accreditation visit in January anyway too, and that can just be part of that ongoing discussion for December's meeting.
Super. Brings us to the 2020-2021 SEEC impact report. So we provided the report at our last meeting, and there was a question regarding 1920 versus 2021. And so we attached that copy, doing a little bit of cross-referencing. That's probably not the word I'm looking for. A little bit of comparison in regards to the previous year. So it was more informational, B was, but we did attach a report. There was a good question somebody had asked in regard to our 2021 versus our 1920 report. Any questions from the board on that? Seeing none, we'll move on to the innovation fund process, grant process. So I will start out,
just for new board members, or just to remind board members, part of what we have done is if we have carryover dollars now, instead of putting it into reserve, as a board, we created this innovation fund process so that schools could do some, there would be additional, we'd stop putting it into reserve, and we'd create an opportunity to invest in projects, collaborative projects across the region. So I will let either Jen or Allison talk a little bit about where we landed as a group, where this draft currently is, and talk about a couple of maybe the high points, or where we've landed as the SEC directors and myself in regards to this application.
That's where I was going. Well, I think one of the things is that, this is only the second year that we've done this, and the initiation of this process started in the very beginning of COVID even. So it really has, a lot of the landscape has changed, but we did take the feedback of the board and the results of the previous year and how it was implemented, and tried to make modifications to the plan and put some additional pieces to the process as requested. And so trying just to streamline, but also make sure that this is, there's more accountability in terms of the feedback and to the board as far as where and how the dollars are being spent, and also the impact that it has. So keeping those things in mind, we made some modifications, and Allison took a lot of those considerations and put it into the document that we have, and we've all had a little bit of time to give some feedback on that. And then I guess we wanted you to see it first, and then the idea is that we will open it up for some comment to the superintendents to get feedback from a larger audience. If you believe that this is where we're at in this process, again, because we were in the middle of COVID, because we were, that was our first attempt at it. We did determine how much each of the schools were eligible for, and we did send dollars directly to the schools without a request, without a very strong requirement of responding to how they use the dollars. And so again, all of the changes that you will see reflected what we talked about last time at the board meeting, and some of those considerations, considering our changed dynamics of the school year. Allison, anything to add there?
The biggest part is, a draft, and we want to start somewhere. We know we're a little late into the year, so we want to get it out, and the times for this year will look a little bit different than what we would anticipate on a standard year once we get it in place. And the other part we really want to have, we've discussed a lot of how do we get the superintendent's feedback. We thought about, do we do a survey with some specific questions early on? And then we came back to, let's just get something on a piece of paper, a layout that we can see, and then just open it up for a full comment period before we put anything into action. And then that third part is looking at that rubric, or how we'd score and how we decide on things. Right now, it would just be our SEEC directors, because we don't know how else to do it. But that thought is also written in there of, are there superintendents that would be interested and willing to serve on that review committee? And it would take consistent commitment. And you would have to, we want to make sure it's a strong group that is looking at it. And we didn't want to write it in a way that it was strictly from our staff and out, but we want to have that collaboration if people are interested in that. So those are some of the other comment pieces that we're hoping to hear back of how to feed this forward. And we'll try it this year and see how it goes. And then a continuous improvement process of, is it working the way it was intended? And we'll make modifications as needed.
Brittany, I see your hand up.
Not intentionally.
Not a problem. Well, maybe I don't see your hand up. Maybe there's just a hand on the screen behind you.
I'm at Central Cass and borrowing someone's desk, so I don't know what's behind me. Sorry.
Not a problem. Well, you know, I know I have at least 5 superintendents that I'm looking at right now. What are your thoughts on the best way to get feedback from superintendents throughout the entire region? Is an email the best way to communicate this out, or what are your thoughts?
You know, when is our next admin meeting? You guys know off the top of your head when the next administrators, SEC administrators meeting is?
The next in-person one wouldn't be until December, I believe. We were looking to do some October, November regional meetings, and that's proving to be a tad difficult. So the full one would be probably that second week of December online.
So I think we should get it to them sooner than later so that people can have some feedback. We don't have to make a final decision until later on, Mitch, but I think we should, and maybe within the email that, and I could send it out, that we target a couple areas for feedback as opposed to just throw it at them and say, you know, tell me what you think, you know, but maybe target some areas and maybe some purposes of why something is, certain areas are, and then that would give us more time to come up with what I'll call a final draft or some feedback. And so then it would be more, it would have some feedback before we got face to face.
So I have had just a couple questions on the innovative fund and how that's going to be available, and not knowing what it was going to be. This kind of is the first look that I pay. If you sent something out before, I didn't pay attention to it. I'll just say that. This is my first look at it. So I think it does have to get out to everyone. I know it's kind of, the question always comes up about the innovative fund when I talk with some of the superintendents about is it that we should apply for this, and you have to have some kind of criteria, and I need to review this and look at this. I just don't want to make it too cumbersome and people are going to ignore it and they're not going to attempt to get at these funds. But it's kind of that dilemma of there's funds that are available. Do we get it out to people through this grant process, or is there another way to handle, and we've talked about this before, registration fees for other things that happen that everyone could tap into if it's, and I don't know how many things we do charge for. I don't know that number, but how do we utilize the dollars that SEEC has, and how do we provide that service to our members? And this might be an opportunity for that, but.
Yep, Steve. So I would agree with you. And so that's why we need to get it out there. So keep in mind a couple things. And again, maybe it's me being around too long. But again, so when I hear the words, and I'm not suggesting this is what you meant, but a lot of times when people say they don't want it to be too cumbersome, that means they want it, that then if it's not cumbersome a little bit, then you don't have to think about it very hard, and there isn't much accountability to it. And so we've always prided ourselves at the SEC that we use these dollars in a way that have an impact. And I think if you look through the history of the projects that we take on and the work that we've done, that we are very conscientious and very frugal with dollars and what we charge, and we do things that have an impact on schools, a positive impact. So it's very hard internally, you know, from a leadership standpoint, when we try to lower the bar. And I'm not suggesting that's what you said, but sometimes when I hear cumbersome, that's make it as easy as possible. And then people don't put any, it's a lot easier for us to evaluate something if somebody's put a lot of time and effort into it. and they've really thought it through and created a relationship. And so I'm looking for feedback, but to some level, to have a positive impact on something, there has to be some level of cumbersome to it.
I think what you said is exactly what I meant.
Okay, very good.
I am
And I was just trying to,
I'm being
let you
completely
know
up-
from,
completely upfront with you. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I meant.
okay. And I was just trying from a leadership standpoint, we're trying to balance the whole thing. That's what we're trying to do.
So are you specifically looking for feedback on the process from all area superintendents?
Yes, all of our members. So
Yeah,
I would
think
send an
sending it
email out.
Isn't,
Yeah.
mhm.
I
I
would
think it's a
send an
great idea
email.
and not cumbersome from what I can see.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's just, I guess it's just how we've always operated. And again, we're happy to get the money out. We really are. We want to do that. There's so many good things going on out there. We want to build on those things.
Well, based upon what I'm hearing, I'm thinking we probably should send out an email with obviously the draft, soliciting feedback. And probably in that email, I would almost put a date on it that we'd like the feedback back by. Assuming we get it out this week, maybe we want it back by November 15th. So that way, whichever superintendents by chance didn't get it back to us, we could do a reach out call to perhaps, because that'll be a narrower list, obviously, or a second email, just reminding them, because ideally we'd like to have this feedback all back in place, so we can have this discussion at our December board meeting, I'm assuming.
That would be great. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And as you have more time to review it too, anybody, I mean, just, we'll send that email out this week yet. So we get a head start on it. I'll work with Jennifer and craft an email, and we'll get that sent out for feedback. And we'll copy the board members on it too, so you can see the email. And most of you are on the board, but I think Patty and Jim and Heidi, you should see it too. So.
Absolutely. Anything else on the innovation fund draft?
Mitch Carlson here. Just a question. I did have a chance to go through it the other day, and question I had is, it says has to be, you cannot use it for existing innovation projects. It has to be sort of brand new from startup. Is that the interpretation I'm getting from that?
I think we're open for feedback on, when I say we're open, we're trying to get feedback on that. If you're building on something, I mean, again, so from my perspective, if you're building on something and you want to continue to broaden that work that you're doing, you're going to have data on why it's been successful. You're going to have why you want to expand it to more kids, or why you want to bring a certain type of person into your school and share it with another one. So if it is existing, you're going to have data and information in regards to why you think that program needs to continue to move forward. So
Right, we do write it in as innovative, but the main part is we want to encourage growth, expansion, and capacity building. So it doesn't have to be something totally new, but how is it going to grow or hit more people or impact more students than what you're currently doing? So it doesn't have to be a new program, but how could it be used to expand it or enhance it or build capacity amongst your staff?
Yeah, Mitch, the way I read it, I don't think it restricts asking for funds to build a current program. It's just talking about, we really don't want these funds to supplant what you're already spending money on. So I think supplant is more important than new, if that makes sense. Anything else on this topic for this morning? Seeing none, we'll move on to our new business section. And I think the bulk of our conversation here is probably going to center around a new office location. I know Kyle just earlier this morning sent out a draft or a copy of the final lease that they're looking at. I don't know if everybody had a chance to look at that in your email, but Kyle, I'll turn it over to you for any opening remarks.
Thanks. So again, the lease didn't come out until this morning. We had our attorney and the landlord's attorney involved in some final wording on it. So I didn't want to send it out until that wording was completed. And I think I got the email last night about shortly after 6. But again, just to review a little bit about where we are in regards to our space. You know, as I mentioned at an earlier meeting, that at some point here in the future, Fargo is looking to decommission this facility. So that's part of the challenge. Again, we'll talk a little bit about the Child Care Aware Grant, and we continue to grow staff with the SEC. And then again, it's just a matter of, so you can see I have a little jacket on today, you know, and when I talk, I have my hands in my pocket, you know, and I'm not even, I'm just being serious. It's cold in my office. It's just, so we just need a little bit more collaborative workspace for all our staff. We're kind of split up in here. And then again, it's just with the growth of our organization. And so as you look at the lease, we've looked at multiple places, spent quite a bit of time over the last 2 months looking at spaces, getting feedback from staff, having conversations about our needs. And this is what we landed on. I guess I will leave it for what kind of questions would you like me to answer in regards to the space and the lease that we have chosen?
Does it give you room for growth, Kyle?
It does, and that's a good question. So that was part of what we were looking at. Again, it's not, you know, trying to figure out how it fit within our budget versus, you know, we don't want to turn around in 2 years and not have enough space then and have to redo this whole thing. And so on the lease, you'll see that we've put out there a 7-year lease. And again, a couple other things. It was a pretty good time to look for space with people working from home. There's a lot of empty office space in Fargo. Some of it not as high quality. You can imagine that the lower quality stuff doesn't get picked, but you know, the middle area, we weren't looking at what they call, they do A, B, and C. You know, we're looking more at a B level kind of office space as opposed to being on top of a bank overlooking the city of Fargo or something, you know. But yes, it does give us room for growth. And so we're comfortable with that, with the size of the facility. That was probably one of the bigger decisions, is the amount of space that we should actually rent versus what is our current need, and then how do we plan that buffer in there too, so we're not turning around and doing it all over again. I think, as I mentioned on the email, just a couple other things is, as we looked at spaces, there's an opportunity to rent a space that we really liked at a Cargill building. It wasn't quite big enough. It had another 1,000 feet, another 1,500 feet. That would have been great. But that building, we would have had to put more money into it. You know, it was, that's how that landlord operated, where we would have put dollars into the remodeling project and kind of build it up from almost scratch. This one here in particular, we're not going to have to put those kind of dollars up front, whether that be 80, 90, $100,000 up front to help with the remodel. The landlords take care of that in this situation.
So
Is that just me or everybody's phone's going off?
There's a silver alert going on.
Yep.
Somebody's probably looking for people my age.
Yeah. So that was a good question, Patty.
So Kyle, what is the square footage of this building compared to what we have now?
The square footage of this building is 6,500 feet compared to what we have now is about 3,200 square feet. So keep in mind, part of the decision that we made with this particular building is to have a training space for up to 20 people. So what we tried to balance is if we didn't have any training space in here, then we almost need a person half-time minimum that constantly calls hotels and does food and schedules hotels and space and those kinds of things. So it was trying to find that balance and you know, having a size of 50 people just wasn't there. So we settled on a space for 20 people. So like how many people were here yesterday for the EL training? Does anybody know off the top of their head?
We had like 16 attendees.
Yeah, so that would have been an example. So we did some EL training here yesterday for from across the state for EL specialists, the SEC gets involved in. So we had 16 people. So we had that upstairs here because we have access to training space. So we would have been able to hold that at our office as opposed to go out for it. And so then going back to Patty's question, just to let you a little deeper into our thinking. So then when Patty says, do you have enough space for growth? At some point in time, you may have to say, okay, does this conference room now have to turn into space because we're growing still and we need more space? Now that wouldn't happen right away either. That would be a last resort as we went down the road. But that's why we're confident that we have enough space in there if we grow.
Kyle, what is the tentative move-in date? I
So
know
if
the
you-
lease, but I'm not sure if.
Yep,
they're
that's
moving
okay.
in
That's a good question, Jim. I just didn't know. So the tentative move-in date would be April 1st. The construction, the remodel, I'll call it, would be done about February 1st. And we would be responsible for some of the utilities in February and March. And then we would start paying rent April 1st.
Okay.
Is that correct, Brenna? Yep.
And Kyle, you have in the rent the A through, I'm not sure what it is there, H. So for the 7 years, you have the built-in cost that will be fixed costs every month.
Correct.
To the years.
Correct. And so we've been in this space almost 8 years, I think.
Is there any other cost that is different than what we currently have? You know, they talk about, phone and those costs that we're going to have. Any other insurance increase? It says they are covering the property insurance, but we have liability insurance. Any other expenses that we have that we don't have currently?
No, so there will be some utility expenses in regards to the heat. So that we don't pay heat here. There will be Jen's smiling. She says we don't really get a lot of heat, so these are all internal fun things. So yes, so yeah, there are some, I'll call them odds and ends. You know, we'll have to pay for our internet. We don't pay for internet here. We're similar to a school, though. They will bring it right to our building because we're part of that K through 12, that whole public system. So there will maybe be a little cost there. So there are some typical odds and ends things that we typically, I use the word typical a lot, but that we don't pay here currently, you know. And again, Fargo's been a great partner. we've really appreciated all the things that they've done. Janitorial, we'll have to have a little bit of janitorial and cleaning, not in the commons area, but in our area, you know, and maybe there's a certain amount of that we can do ourselves, but again, it will be.
I don't think you can have the heat on in there though, because I see we're responsible for paying for all utilities.
Yeah. No, we joke a little bit. We don't mean to pick on Fargo at all. I feel bad sometimes when I do that, but I mean it's been very good for us. The Dakota High School here and the people here are just wonderful to work with.
Assuming our liability coverage that we currently carry meets the limits, and that the landlord is able to be added to the policy as that under that section.
I see Brenna nodding her head. That was one of the areas that we wrote into the lease after our attorney looked into it. Right, Brenna? Okay.
Any other questions on the new office space?
I just reviewed it briefly. Is there an opt-out? Like if we decide this space, we get there and find out the space just is really not that great. I didn't read probably far enough into it.
No.
Otherwise it looked great.
Yeah. No, there's no opt-out unless certain conditions aren't followed through on within the lease.
How many years are we locked in?
7.
And after the 7th year, is there an automatic renewal?
So within the lease, there's a time frame in there that we can opt out of the lease, and there's a time frame we can opt out of the lease after 7 years.
I mean, could they break the lease stop the lease after 7 years and we'd be looking?
There's an option to renew. There's 2 3-year options to renew. So theoretically, we could tie it up for a total of 16 years.
Yeah.
Well, seeing no other questions or comments on that, let's move on to accreditation.
Just one other question.
Go ahead.
The address is there, it's on 32nd Avenue, is that right?
Yeah, it's just north of, so if you're familiar with Fargo, it's just, there's a new Casey's gas station and a JL Beers. Just north of there. It's a really nice location, I think, you know, off on the interstate, as many people as we have traveling. So if you're familiar where Cass County Electric is, it's just west of there a little bit.
Is it pretty close? We have a University of Jamestown.
Yes.
Campus
It's
there
between
and PT
40.
school.
Yep, it's between 42nd, where UJ is, and Dakota Medical Foundation, and then 45th Street. So it's on 32nd Avenue between 42nd and 45th.
Yep. It's a little southeast of that.
Yeah, that's a nice area.
It is. So Jim, I do think I believe we need a motion to approve the lease. Would we not?
I'll make a motion to approve the lease as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the lease as provided. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying yes. Oh, hold it. Heidi has something.
Oh, no, that was my vote.
Oh, all those in favor signify by saying yes.
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 Any opposed signify by saying no. Motion carries. That brings us to accreditation.
So I just, again, was wanting to remind everybody that we have an accreditation visit January 18th and 19th, 17th and 18th, 17th, 18th and 19th, that week there in January. And so again, we've started meeting on that process. Obviously, we were accredited 5 years ago. It's part of the requirement for regional education associations in North Dakota. It was added in the 2015 legislative session. And so we are going through that process again, and we will have more information to you in December. So you may hear or be requested to provide some feedback on some things. And are there other things? Jen Glasheen is leading that. But we've been meeting as directors. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Jen?
No, I just think that obviously we're putting together a timeline to make sure that we're able to accomplish all of the tasks that are required of us. The team that will be the engagement review team will be virtual, just like many of you who have gone through the reviews in the past year and a half. So it'll look slightly different than it did the last time we did it. This is the beginning of the second round for the REAs. So all of the REAs have been through this process once, but as many of you know, a lot of those standards have, and the processes within Cognia change frequently. And so we're trying to learn a new process again, as far as those components that apply to ESAs, education service agencies. And so with some of the diagnostics, we are trying to make sure that this is a meaningful process to us, while at the same time not reinventing the whole Cognia process to make it fit us. There are some points where we get a little stuck sometimes, but like Kyle said, as directors, as we go through that productive struggle, it helps us to kind of come together and get on the same page. We've had a lot of expansion and growth, and you'll hear about some more of those things over 5 years. And so again, sometimes it's just a good process for us to come back together, even if it isn't the most ideal process. So we will be looking at some of the diagnostic tools that we will be using to gather more feedback from different stakeholder groups. But that process, again, knowing that we need to be prepared prior to Christmas with a lot of those materials for the engagement review team to review. We're supposed to have things in 4 weeks prior. We're hoping that we're going to try to keep this train on the track. The other thing is we know we have Kyle for a limited amount of time in some respects with a lot of the legislative things that are going on. So it's a process, it's a timeline, and we're trying to make it fit our needs so that we can, again, gather good feedback that will help us to continually improve. More to come.
Super. I think that gets us to our childcare aware contract.
So I'll be brief in what I say. So I'll let Jolene talk a little bit about it, but again, so we were awarded I'll call it a 21-month grant for about a little less than $2.1 million. And it's a grant that it's not like it's going to go away in 21 months. It will be an ongoing grant. And so again, I think the important thing for us from an organizational standpoint is as we looked at opportunities to continue to grow and to provide infrastructure and deliver services in collaboration with our schools, we recognize from a federal level that the potential of universal pre-K for 3 and 4-year-olds is coming down the pike. We understand the challenges from a workforce standpoint, that childcare is the barrier for us, and so we feel like we do things. We're good at helping processes, especially things that are focused more systemically across the state, and so collectively we made a decision to move forward with this grant, and we were awarded it about the 1st of October. I'll let Jolene talk a little bit more about the grant. So I'll turn it over to her.
So this is part of the CCDF funding that comes from the federal government, and each state is responsible for sort of providing 3 aspects to childcare. So when Lutheran Social Services went bankrupt, they held all 3 contracts and the state bid them out separately. We just bid on one, the childcare where which we felt most closely aligned. It's responsible for providing professional development, coaching, technical assistance, and the parent referral information for childcare openings across the state. Because those employees who were at childcare, where some of them remained to do the work and have been temporary employees with DHS. So we were fortunate. Keely Irie is going to be the managing director of that program. We're shifting some of her responsibilities with full service community schools and SEL. She'll still be involved in those, but we'll be taking the lead on this project under student services. So we are working on kind of building that team up. We have been able to hire some of the temporary DHS staff who are in those roles and are working on sort of building that statewide team over time over the next couple of months. But we have been working in early childhood over the last couple of years with some of our pre-K reading core and SEEDS work, and with the after school network on the school age side, providing technical assistance and professional development. We just saw a lot of continuity there for the system. And so that was one of the factors that helped us kind of move forward with this work. So we're working with DHS to get that up and running over the next couple of months. We'll have about 11 FTEs that will be part of that project spread across the state. Obviously, the bulk of childcare is in this region. There's about 1,200 providers that are licensed with the state as family child care centers or self-declared. And all of the work is voluntary. So providers would reach out to get assistance in different services. Some align with the state's, some of the COVID dollars for startup childcare and some of the grants that are out there. And then there's a few compliance pieces, but a lot of startup childcare and health and safety work with the 2 nurses who are part of that team who are going in and providing education and support for providers.
Questions? So again, it will be interesting, you know, to see where they end up with universal pre-K at the federal level. As somebody that has taken an interest in this area and childcare, a lot of these funds could go directly to schools. Now, of course, they'd have to pass through the Department of Public Instruction. The other piece that's important, and it could go through Human Services, is keep in mind that we created within Human Services the early childhood division, and that's where our new best in class with 4-year-olds is at. And part of our work with Child Care Aware is to work with the best in class of 4-year-olds, and most of those are school districts across the state. So that infrastructure is very important. We think that's the foundation with which our organization has been built. To, whether you look at the health insurance, the Medicaid, the MTSS, it's the systematic reading core that we succeed at, we do well, and they create a foundational base for our organization from a funding standpoint. So again, any questions on that?
Seeing none, let's move on to the audit update.
Well, I'll be brief, and if Brenna wants to shout out, I'll let her shout out. But so as most of you are aware, or many of you are aware, or you should be aware, that there was some challenges with an auditor here in the state of North Dakota. We have different requirements from an SEC standpoint than a school does necessarily, but we had used that auditor in the past, and we will be moving away from that auditor to one we used a couple years ago. And I just thought that that just needed to be brought out front as we are. I think the people down in Wapaton are finalizing our audit for this, not the past year, but the year before that. So
Do we have
So-
any, I don't know what the word is, but anything that we're gonna have to continue to deal with as a result of that?
So that's a good question. And I guess, Brenna, would you like to answer that, or would you like me to take a stab at it? I don't believe there will be anything ongoing.
I don't think so. We're actually having Daniel Juleson do our 1920 over. We're not gonna use the one that was about finished, and then he'll start 2021 as well. So we're basically starting over. I'm dealing with it, but I don't think going forward it will be a problem at all. So is that what you think, Kyle?
Yeah, thank you. We've used Daniel Juleson for many years in Richland, so that's great.
Well, I think the next thing on our agenda is just an update on board positions and terms. We have several that are going to be up next June. Anything else on that you wanted to highlight at this point in time, Kyle?
Did Steve, Steve, did you want to share a conversation yesterday afternoon?
Yeah, I did call Kyle yesterday, and as we have passed a bond issue here in Kindred and all the other committees and things that I am involved in and on, I need to pull back on a few things. And this is probably going to be one of my positions that I am going to step back on, that I am not going to go to the end of the term, even though it's the end of this school year, I think, actually, the summer of 2022.
Yep.
But I'm on so many different committees and working on things, I need to step back on something, and this is going to be one of those.
So I asked Steve, to stay on through December. And then what I thought, and I thought Mitch made a good point at the last board meeting is, you just need to put it out to whatever region it is. Steve happened to be the lead administrator. And so that could come from anywhere. And so my thought is that we just would put that opening and ask for nominations via email, and people could nominate, and then we could either hold a vote in December in person, or we could do it online. We just talked late yesterday afternoon, so that those are some of my thoughts driving home last night and this morning. So, but certainly appreciate everything Steve has done, helping get Indy Fit off the ground and being a board member for SEEC for many years.
Well, so you're going to send out a email asking for nominations, and then I can nominate Steve. Is that what you were saying?
But does that process sound reasonable? I mean, superintendents that are on the board, is that? Because it can come from anywhere. It could be it doesn't have to be a specific region.
My thought is to send it out to the administrators, the superintendents, and get nominations from them.
Right.
Then they appoint, so.
Yep.
I mean, that could come in any form that you deem necessary, I guess, in that regards.
Yep, that's exactly what I think. There's got to be a way to have an online vote or something, or wait till it's in person in December, or to get everybody to vote. I think online works better to make sure everybody has a vote. But then again,
Well, I too want to extend my thanks to you, Steve. You have been a very valuable member of this board for many, many years. And best of luck on the bond issue and the building project. And of course, there's always the opportunity to retread and come back on to this board later. And we'd love to have you back.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll be around.
Yep. I think that gets us through our agenda. Our next meeting is scheduled for December 8th, and that too will be a Zoom meeting. I believe at 11:30. Is there anything else for the good of the order this morning?
Jim, just on the minutes, I'm listed in the minutes, but I'm listed absent. We just fix that. Otherwise, if you're good.
Okay, duly noted. Well, with that, we are officially adjourned. Everybody have an enjoyable last week of fall before winter shows up. Maybe we can hold off until after Thanksgiving, but I have a feeling those snowflakes are not too far away.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.